So this is a kind of like epistemological question, and you could roughly correlate these as like first person and third person. So basically, I think there's like a shared value structure between like what circling tends to look for, and like any given human's like inner rationalist. It's like, are you full of BS, and how do you know? And that's basically like they just want us to be honest and truthful in our speech and in our actions. And I think sometimes like circling can go a little too far in a direction of the kind of like, how do you know? And ironically accidentally like reduce the amount of truth by like for example, if somebody was like, man, you just dismissed me. And then some circler is like, well, you feel dismissed. I think that's actually reducing the amount of truth, because whether someone got dismissed or not is actually an empirical claim. Like we can find out the truth of dismissal or non-dismissal. That's not necessarily a feeling. And so if you try to reduce it to like, you might say, well, how was that for you? Like, how is it to have that story or to see this thing as dismissal? That's an interesting question, but then you're not dismissing the claim. It's like a third person claim. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Not really. Yeah, this is not necessarily what I wanted to get into, but it's just been touching me a lot. Like I feel like I've gone so far into the realm of like, how do I even know what's happening, and let me question like all of it. Like right now, how do I even know that I'm here? How do I know there's a world at all? That I like lose sight of like all these really cool, like important claims. And even if I don't know I'm here, like there's something crazy about the not here-ness that I could like consistently, like, I don't know, take two special kinds of rocks that look the same, and hit them together and like start a fire. Like I can just always do that. That's a different cool thing to know about life. There's like a lot of that stuff that I don't want to ignore just because we're circling.
It tickles me. So it comes up for me with like somebody saying, "Oh, you just dismissed me." Like, I think the way you said it was like, it feels like maybe one of the people needs to reflect. Like maybe the person saying like, "Oh, I think you just dismissed me," like the person they're speaking to like should really like reflect on it. And then like there's a way, it's like sometimes it seems like the speaker needs to actually like reflect, like, wait, maybe that's not actually dismissal. Like I think I noticed things like that where there's like some kind of hierarchy of like who actually needs to take the lesson.
Yeah. It's tricky because in different moments, there's a kind of like, there's like a pragmatic thing where like, whether like you can't always make someone take a look. So then it's just a question of like, well then are you willing to keep going or engage in the relationship or get something out of it, whether or not they took a look? You might be able to separate like the claim on truth from the impact. And sometimes when you're like, hey, you just dismissed me, and someone's like, whoa, it's because they're like noticing you're making two different claims. One is like, you dismiss me, which is actually just a neutral claim. You can dismiss a pop-up on your browser, and it's not saying it's a good or a bad thing. It's just that you didn't want it. And then there's like a kind of moral or value judgment of like, you're bad because you did that, or you're abandoning me, or so some of it's like, yeah, it might be like, oh, I really wish you would look at that dismissal, but I like for sure what I know I can do is look at is to whether I have any attachment to it or not. So yeah, you might have actually dismissed me, and then there's something else happening in me where it hurts, and I can always like go to that level whether or not you're willing to find out whether you dismissed me or not.
It's my work.
So you said always.
I should probably stop saying always,
Why?
because I think those are usually third person claims, and I usually don't have the like actual data to back it up.
So what percentage of the time does it happen?
Which
Well, what you said always about.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, okay, so my experience is that when I'm really paying attention, it's probably always. Probably always. Because it's like any kind of observation, what's the difference between what you observe and what's real?
I like
You don't
probably
really
always.
ever-
I like probably always. It's like a reframe of usually.
Well, it's quite a bit more specific, isn't it? Probably always. I mean, it's probably, for one thing, it's probabilistic, which is really
Makes
useful.
more sense. Yeah.
And always, which is like an opinion. It's like a quasi opinion. So
That's
I mean,
true.
if I look hard enough, it's there. It's usually there. I don't always feel it.
What's it?
The it is like it hurts. It's like you're not just being yourself.
Right,
You're being a motherfucker to me.
right,
I
exactly.
want to kill you, or I want to whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a really complex topic, what you brought up, like whether there's a kind of reality independent of observation, like seems in some ways like kind of obvious that there is. But then on the other hand, like I don't know how to know. Because every time I've ever checked, there's been a subjectivity, like doing the checking.
Don't we essentially know from quantum physics that like the observer effect tells us that they're like that the observing of reality changes it?
Yeah, there's some sort of entanglement between observing and occurring, for sure.
Have you come across that stuff? There's a guy named Emil Seth. He does work on the brain. He basically maintains that your brain is you're ordinarily in a psychedelic trip, and the brain is creating. There's a whole lot of information that's part of a very complex model that we buy into, without, of course, knowing it, because that's our experience.
I haven't, so let's table that for now.
Yes, definitely.
I'm gonna like table all this. I think this is really fun, but I'm also realizing like I don't have like a point that I'm going to, and I think talks tend to go better when like I have a point that I can like reiterate. So I'm like, yeah, this shit's cool. It's important. Truth is the best. Love is pretty much the same. Carry on. So I'm gonna just get rid of that for now. Go in a different direction. How's that sound? Yeah? Now for something completely. And I have notes for this one. So this came to me when I was listening to Sean try to explain to a bunch of really logical mathematical people the definition of surrender. And there was like a lot of people that were upset with the word surrender. And I was like, oh, I think I know what's happening. And I thought it was going to be really simple to explain, and instead it was really complicated. So, I'm going to do it now. Yeah. Okay. So I think when we're talking about stuff in the world, it's meaningful to divide it into like at least three like broad categories of stuff. These are realms that I'll call the concrete realm, which is basically like bounded by a fence. This is anything you could put a fence around. So that includes like a marker, or a house or a country, right? It's just anything you can. It's fine.
Like a person.
A person as well, a body. Yeah. Then I'm going to say the next is like a kind of. I'm going to try this word and see if it works for us. This is a new thing. A kind of a linguistic or like idea world. And this is basically language bound. So like a person's body is in concrete, a person's personality is kind of in this linguistic realm. Does that make sense? What other things like emotions, like your sense of your interior, the idea of a democracy, like all of these things are kind of like language. We can like capture them in language and like manipulate them through language, right? Let's say the next realm of experience, this is a rough term borrowing from another body of work, is the meta-aware realm. And what I'm going to say is that this is kind of experience bound, or you might even say like immediacy bound. So we're just going to put immediacy bound. That made more sense to somebody last time I said it. That experience bound. And I'm not really sure about this. Because I can say this because I have some sense of like having like experience or like a kind of immediate, probably y'all have all had a sense of like a thing that is very real that you can like point to with language, but that act of like languaging it kind of like condenses it into, which it's fine, like the language does point to me, but for some, like if you try to put language and then you try to like talk about it, somehow it doesn't quite do the thing justice, right? The same way if we're like, oh well, David, and you're only like talking about his body, you're like, yeah, that is David, but it's not all of David. It's the same thing. So if I'm like, yeah, the like experience of oneness, like that oneness does kind of capture it, but it's not all of it. There's a kind of another tier of this little deal here.
Is this true of everything linguistic?
I think so, but there's something meaningful about like if I like tell a dog like bone, it like knows like it can there's a shared experience of like what the object that this is pointing to is with the bone. If I try to tell the dog like the square root of -1, it knows that you're referring to something. It can hear the symbol, but it will never be able to like actually understand what that symbol points to. Because it's like in a different realm of its experience, the dog can't know. Yeah. Okay. And similarly, like if I talk about like surrender, which we'll get to, like at this tier, a child is probably going to have no way. They'll know you're pointing to something. Same way the dog is like square root of -1, sure, but they can't like go grab you the surrender and like play fetch with you. Yeah. Okay, so I kind of blew my load a little early there, but that's fine. We'll keep going. It's going to be interesting. Hopefully. Is it interesting so far?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's take, Let's take the example of being present, or presence. When you hear this and you're like a dog, what this means is like being physically located, right? So, Christine, who's over here? Christina and Yvonne and Sandy are like, they're actually not present from this definition, right? But they are present in the sense of like having a focal attention here. And I think this is what often people think of when we say presence. It's like, oh yeah, like my presence. Where's the focus of my attention? I think we sometimes mean this encircling, and we also mean this thing, which, because of the issue with language, I'm just gonna like do this. That's the symbol right now. Knowing it's like an irony to put it into a symbol. I think a good example of this is like in a circle where you're like noticing that the focus of your attention actually wanders. So you're like, so weird, I'm thinking about like the villain from this like superhero movie. But then you're aware of that focus shifting, and you realize like, I wonder if that's like relating to what's going on with Eric. And so then you bring it in, and you're like, I'm just thinking about this villain who happens to be like the main character from another life. Like, is this like, are you somehow like sabotaging yourself or something like that? And you're like, I don't know if this relates, but I'm going to try it. And so even though the focus of your attention is elsewhere, just like our Circle Anywhere friends are like technically located elsewhere, but they're present here, there's a kind of presence where your attention is here even though it's not. Makes sense? So this is, I think, really helpful because presence, like, this is really helpful to notice. Like, a lot of people won't realize it. I'll split people out into this. You guys don't ever really do this. I actually mean that. I'm not like doing that teasing thing where we like self-awarely make fun of ourselves. But sometimes like I'll break people into groups, and there's like 15 groups in one room, and they're like, I can't focus. Like I need to like we need to have a group outside, or how can you expect us to be present when there's like all this noise going on in the room? And they're talking about like this, and I'm like, you can definitely be present because of this. And I've just seen over and over, like when you have a room and people are like, when you go into like a deep resonance, it doesn't matter how much sound is happening, you just both are there. It doesn't matter how quiet the person is talking. And often what people don't realize, and I get the privilege of like walking around and hearing and seeing, is that there's usually a thematic element that is like uniting the whole group, even though they have no like communication between the groups. I think that's this realm of presence. I'm surprised by that. So yeah, it's so cool. This making sense? Is this useful? Can you imagine like this, like being in a particular situation where you're like noticing, I'm like not present, and like you start to like kind of castigate yourself, and you're like, wait, hold on, maybe my non-presence is like related. Because that would be, I think, an awesome outcome. If you got like one thing from this talk, and it was like that you were at a bar and you like started to like judge yourself for like getting on your phone, and then you stop and like, I wonder if this is related to like everything that's going on now. I would be really happy. And I'd love for you to tell me about it somehow. Okay, so let's do another one. Everything is bigger whiteboard. This time we're going to do surrender. And we could also do leadership. We could also do, I think that'd be interesting. I haven't done that one. Maybe we'll do one after this together. Okay. So with surrender, I think what this usually refers to at the concrete level is submission. And I think that's why people really react poorly to this word. Because obviously this can go really poorly. Could be really nice, but like there has to be a lot of supporting structures. I think at this level it refers to a kind of humility. So I'm kind of I'm surrendering my like claim that I know for sure what's going on. Essentially, so the kind of like willingness to look, a willingness to be surprised, be shown different things. And again, I think when we talk about surrender, we're pointing to actually both of these levels. Here we have this feel. This one is, I think, where we take our, it's more like we're surrendering our whole like self-concept. So here, I think we still have a sense of self, and we're being humble as that self. Here, it's like I'm willing for my whole sense of like the world, the self, the agenda, the like ideology I hold to all be like edited at a minimum, updated, maybe totally uprooted, and like being shown a totally different truth about what reality is and who I am in relationship with that.
So at the beginning of the sentence, you say, I am willing.
Yeah.
Which implies a sense of agency.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's a good question. I think that this is this is around like a similar thing with presence, where it was like it seems like I'm not present, but that's actually what can bring me, my awareness of it can bring me present. I think it's similar with this agency. It's like it seems like there's an I that gets to choose whether it's here or not. I don't know. It's a really good question. Like, I don't know how much we get to choose. My sense is that we can choose to try to be in the way. That like makes the experience worse. And when we're instead choosing to be more like teachable or open, not in the sense of like emotionally open, but like causally open or like beliefully open to being wrong, open to being shown that our opinions about the world were false or misguided. The experience of humaning, I guess, goes better because I think this is actually more, in a way, more true or real or more causative.
Phrase letting go comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is a kind of letting go of like your physical control. This is a kind of letting go of your like psychological control. I think this is letting go of your experiential control or your I don't know, your identity control, which is part of what we do circling wise, like by entering into like relationship, doing presence relationally. There's a kind of constant reminder that you're not that like there's only certain choices you get to make, and you're at least partially made up by like all the things outside of you, or at least in relationship to all of that which is outside of you, which includes other people. Which maybe that's what you're trying to include is a kind of like limits of autonomy.
I'm just really interested in like the boundary of the edge going into that circle that you drew there. You know, for me, it's something that I very rarely recognize
Yeah.
at the moment. In the moment, like sometimes it can take a second or a decade or more for me to understand that there's an agency that is outside of an identity.
Yeah. That's really helpful. I think there's one thing I was just stumbling across last week where like the importance of like seeing agency in this is to like realize that you have the power to choose something different now. Like there's only a kind of the power is always now, right? Like even if I look back at my history, the way I interpret it now will change what I experience of that history. Even if I can't change the events, which of course I'm not claiming you can. But if I look at something that was like really painful and I see it as like I was a victim of that, that's going to be a different experience than if I look at that and I'm like, wow, that was like kind of an initiation. That was like something that brought me into the kind of person that I am today. Even though it was painful, even though I wouldn't want anyone else to go through to that, like I would choose that again. That's going to make a really different experience in the past. And there's a sense then, so you're making a choice there with how you see it. I think that's where the agency really is. And then even like, I was thinking about like as a child, there was this like famous dream that I had in my family, where I was like 6 years old when I had this dream. It's funny we're talking about dreams. And there's a bagel shop on like 20 to 22 and what is that street, Exposition or something. There was like we'd walk to, my house was like pretty close, and we'd get bagels and like walk back, and it was a big treat for my family. Like 6 years old, and it's the 90s, so bagel shops aren't that common in Austin. They're really not that common now. But in any case, it was like awesome. But for whatever reason, in this dream, I was tasked with like carrying the bagels across this like chasm on this rickety rope bridge or dying. And it's like somehow I knew the bagels were too heavy, and so if I like walked across this bridge, I would definitely die. So it's basically like the phrase was "carry the bagels or die," and it was like I'm gonna die either way. And I told my parents this, and my mom was just like utterly horrified. She was like, "What the fuck have I been doing?" Like, that this kid at this young of an age already thinks that he has like this much responsibility, which probably tells you something about my character now if you hadn't already gotten that. But yeah, it's really interesting because like so there's a moment there where like somehow at a very very early age I'd like taken on all this stuff. I'm sure I'd taken it on from my parents or the American culture, the Puritan dream. I have no idea, but it's like I interjected something that wasn't like native to me. Does everyone know that term, introjected? Does that make sense? So you can like project something out, like you throw out something you don't want to deal with. So I'm angry, I don't want to feel it, and I'm like, so then I put it on Mark. I'm like, Mark's angry at me, and I've just projected my anger onto him, and I'm like, innocent, yay. Well, introjection is the opposite. So like, you know, Mark's very into like taking a lot of responsibility for everything, even stuff that he shouldn't be taking responsibility for. He's my dad. I don't have good boundaries because I'm a baby. And so I just like put that in, I throw that into myself, and I assume it's me. And this is one of the reasons, actually, as a total detour, we're like totally off the rails now. But I'm having fun. I hope you are too. Yeah. Okay. This is one of the reasons why I have a slight gripe around conceptions of the self that involve like a kind of pluralistic view of like inner voices. So you know, people will be like, "Oh, I've got a part that thinks this and a part that thinks that, and this part feels this and this part that feels that." I think what's problematic is sometimes or often that conceptualization comes along with an idea that they're all equal, these voices, and you just choose which one makes sense, and you try to love them all, and like circling helps you love them all, so circling automatically buys into this view, and I'm like, no. Because some of those voices might be introjected bullshit that's not native to you. And you should take them and say, like, sorry, no. And you don't belong here. And a good example of this is often like an inner critic. An inner critic, like, is so fucking self-righteous, and it never bothers to like critique where like the foundation it stands on. Seems so obvious when you look at it, but like you might notice even right now, I've said that their inner critic's like, yeah, you should have seen this already. But like, how the hell does it know that? So that voice of the inner critic, like it might still be trying to help you in some way. You might still be able to like learn to love it and welcome it and like use its energy for something. But it also might be that you have to just be like, no, sorry, go away. That's not appropriate. I'm enjoying myself here. You don't need to critique me. You're like inner critic. Are we good?
I like that. I really think that was very helpful. So to put the different energies on, you know, you might say, well, that's just inner critic, but actually, there's many layers of that. Very helpful.
Right. Good to hear. Thank you. How are we doing over here?
I'm really liking this. What came up for me was like, like the dissolving of self. I was thinking of like how I really love the circling question, like, are you feeling that now? Like when somebody's like, oh, Jordan's angry. I always respond to anger in defense or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, are you feeling defensive now? I'm like, no. Like some kind of dissolving, like, oh, what's happening now is happening now. And I'm not actually that person.
Yeah, that's awesome. It brings up in me two things. One is like, I'm not sure that there, like, I have a theory. I'm not sure about this, but like the same way you're like, okay, there's like a concrete, like, actual like body, and then you're like, okay, there's like a kind of like this here. There's this concrete body. But there's also this like personality that like expresses in different ways. You know, you throw a peace sign, and he has spiky hair. They have spiky hair. and there's like I think there's probably another like self here that is like somehow like maybe it's like it's kind of I don't know, it's connected to all the other beings with their personalities. So maybe it's more universal. But the point is, I don't think you actually like, get rid of the self necessarily. I think there's like a wider, more all-encompassing self. And I think this is important because I've seen people be like, "Oh yeah, I got rid of like my identity," and yeah, I'm like, where, who am I? Who? What?
What's your immediate experience of self?
In what right now?
Yeah.
It's a mix. It's a fucking vast interplay of tons of stuff. So yeah, that's a great question, and I have stuff like I've never met somebody that didn't refer to themselves as I.
Yeah.
I have met people that tried to not, but like
Sounds obnoxious.
it's really bad. Yeah.
But just because they can't do it doesn't mean that it's not a theoretical possibility.
Sure, totally. But then all the like best mystics and teachers, like they definitely don't reject the I. They have a much bigger I. I mean, like they go so big as like I am the way, the truth, and the life. Like I am, and then you cease to speak. It's like the biggest possible I you can imagine. It includes absolutely everything. So then it's like, yeah, it's not about getting rid of this identity, but like, can you expand to include more? Can you love more? Can you embrace? And then your thing of like, yeah, like I was angry. And so on the one hand, it's like checking right now, am I actually still angry? Like, and you're like, oh shit, I have to let go of that because I actually don't feel wronged anymore. I actually just feel okay. So you're expanding to include more in that moment, checking, like, is it actually here right now? But on the other hand, you often, like both can be threatening. It can be threatening to admit that you're not angry or sad or happy or whatever it was you thought you were. You're not doing the thing you always do. You have to let go and be much bigger. It also can be super threatening to then check and be like, fuck, like I am still super pissed. And I like have done all my Tonglen and I've done all my circling and like, God damn it, I still think this person is an asshole and I still can't get over my shadow. And like, that's the truth of who I am right now. And like, can you be big enough to allow yourself to fully embrace and love that experience of being human in the moment and know that it's like life, which is what you are, is like way more than big enough to allow that and give that a big fucking yes. Oof, I got some energy there.
Amazing.
For the, yeah.
Let's do leadership.
Okay, let's do leadership. We got tons of time. Minutes. Did I erase this one, or you got the categories now? Okay, well that's this one.
Definitely figure that weird, trippy, immediate self.
yeah, the immediate self actually includes like all of time and like different timelines. This is the worm of time. For those of you who've heard me talk about that before. This is Earth 616 for Marvel fans. This is the DC universe. Actually, it's just a big piece of shit. Except for Wonder Woman, that's pretty. That's
Not even
okay.
sitting on top of the ship.
Yeah, there you go. Apparently Shazam is okay as well, but I haven't seen it yet, so that's a different universe. This is Shazam's universe.
Still thinking about Metalware surrender. Seems like could frame it as willingness to change. It's simple as that.
Yeah. And a willingness to say the same.
Seems to me like a willingness to understand that all the things that we call I are not necessarily I. rather than there is no I.
Yeah. I is like situated in something much grander. But yeah, I think we'll come back to leadership. Like,
Sure.
if you have like you're like, yeah, I have an I, and it's called whatever, Jordan. Then I think there's a thing where it's like, okay, that's situated in a bunch of like cultural contexts, like American, it's like 2020, male, all that stuff that's like very important. And then like that's actually situated in like a larger developmental sequence that like involves like humans from like tribal up to now. And then like there's like another sequence that includes like the entire like movement, like the Big Bang to now, and like Eros. It like drives us to complexity, and agape. It's like, yeah, fuck it, like let's include everything because it's all the best. So and like just at least, yeah, enough sense to like do something right. Okay. I had another example. I'm glad you brought that up of surrender, and that's like sometimes we'll experience in circling these kind of like core dilemmas. You're like, oh shit, like I really want people to be close, and yet like I push them away in order to stay safe to try to get close. So you're like, we all know that one, right? And you notice there's this dilemma, like push pull, like yeah, I need to be away to be safe to be close. You're like, huh? And so there's this kind of like, I think from here the surrender is like experiencing that core dilemma, and not necessarily needing to resolve it. Because I think if you recognize it in this one, you're like, okay, cool, I should fix it somehow. Because I need to like be humble enough to admit that I have these problems I need to fix. And then the weird thing though is that like at this level, this is like where you have to, it's like, yeah, you're willing to change, but also willing to stay the same. It's like, I'm willing to experience the core dilemma, but I'm also willing to like not need to deny wanting it to be different. Like, I have this core dilemma. I definitely want it to go away. That's okay.
Like allowing the paradox to exist.
Yeah. Because like from this kind of vantage point, there's no, the paradox only feels paradoxical if something has to be done that isn't already being done. Like from this kind of surrender, like the doing is done. Like the doing is happening every moment. It's already doing you. Life is doing you as your core dilemma. And like in your recognition of it, like there's already more life force, more awareness, more energy, like more freedom. Like life just got more, like in a tiny grain of sand on a beach kind of way. I got a little bit more alive, a little bit more present. That's like more than enough. This is gonna be all now. So now we're gonna play with leadership. What do you guys think?
Role, or president.
I think that belongs here. If you're right.
I mean, like seeing someone in the act of that role.
Yeah, like doing something leaderly.
Yeah,
It's like
it's concrete. No, like I'm saying, like,
yeah. Like well, standing in front of a room.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Nice. What else would be an example?
Impalpable.
Nice. Yeah. That pretty much makes sense to everyone.
Well, the alpha wolf would be like a role, right?
But like an alpha wolf. Not like the
Actual
role of an
wolf.
alpha wolf, but an actual physical.
The actual wolf acting alpha in that movie.
But that would just be a wolf plus a role.
Right.
No, but like that's the conceptual level that you.
If we said submitting for the other, then this is dominating. Right? The alpha, when the alpha is alphating, they're like dominating. Pack. That's the active leader. Okay, so there's a role here. What else?
Even like the followers are worth mentioning. 'Cause you can't really lead without anybody following.
Yeah.
Talking about desire to be a certain way.
Yeah, there's a sense of like wanting something different and being willing to move towards it.
That's not what I meant, but I like that too.
Power maybe business.
Yeah, totally. And especially the kind of role power versus like the sheer, like we're burning coal, or something like that. Or like dominant power of like I
That's
have more
more like
muscle.
an instinctual feeling, right? Like an instinct,
Yeah,
survival instinct. An instinct.
yeah, exactly.
On the bottom, it's kind of interesting in terms of like where that gets back to, for me, the question of agency.
Yeah,
That there's an agency moving through. I thought when you spoke to a moment ago, and expanded your vision of life, of seeing all these dimensions that are functioning. We're not never not usually aware.
yeah,
So there's not like the top down kind of leader, like, oh, I need to do this when I go into the meeting, and there's like all these PowerPoints, versus go into the room and stuff's happening because you're tapping into some intelligence in yourself.
yeah. There's a kind of tapping into sense here, which is it's weird. This is where like I think in this realm you often get like, okay, well, like leadership and surrender look pretty damn similar, but they're different sides of the same coin. They're like at this level, like listening is also a kind of an act of speaking or expressing. You know that like silence is an expression, and vice versa. Like when you're expressing, you're also listening. You're taking in the hearing of others. There's a sense of like you're leading as a part of the pack. Strength. What is it? The strength of the wolf is in the pack, and strength of the pack is in the wolf. From the Jungle Book. Yes.
It's like seems like if it's the role is the linguistic realm, setting that aside, like everybody here is a leader, like even the objects in the room. And being back there has like an influence on the space, which influences your speech.
Yeah, there might be like dynamic ranges. Like Dinner's leadership might be less than, or more than the couches, but like less than the whiteboards, or the act of my writing. So I'm defining what we're talking about more actively or more powerfully, like by putting symbols on the board than like Dinner's appearance in the room. But there is an effect.
Something about the whole way of conceptualizing this coming to mind as I'm trying to like sort of see what comes up with the immediate experience of leadership, which is that like the concrete is like the embodiment of the thing. The linguistic is like the idea or concept of the thing, and then the meta-aware is like the experience of the thing in the present moment.
Mhm.
So when I think about like what's the experience of leadership in the present moment, yes, it's in a way it's like impossible to put it into words, which is the kind of the point because it's out of the language realm.
Yeah, we're like,
But I also expect that it's like it's quite different for different people. Like some people have an experience that's very like challenging or negative associated with leadership. Other people seem to have like a very positive experience with leadership. Like it can be like trust and or goodness somehow with leadership. And for other people, it's very challenging or difficult.
Does anyone watch Game of Thrones?
Don't tell me what just happened.
I'll not use that as an example. I was just thinking about some leadership, like what you were saying, relating to a few different characters. Yeah, it does seem in the same way there's like the surrender side, like when you're like what you're surrendering to is going to be real, so unique and different. It might look really weird, and there's like lots of historical examples of people that made these really big impacts by like following a kind of trust that was very much not what society expected. And it's similar in the leadership side, it seems like. There's a sense in which like you're taking actions or like following inner directives in a way, following the inner guidance to like impact space in ways that might look pretty strange to a lot of people. So it might be like, for example, I've been recently, some of the weekends, like making an effort not to speak as much. Like really, like I notice that like my leadership, I think at this level can be dominant in the space, and people can like kind of lay back and relax into like my leading, and that's not as useful or meaningful to people's experience of learning circling or running into their edges as if I can like stay quiet more and actually lead less, so that other people get a chance, but then come in like more like sharp or precise in certain moments.
That's really contextual.
Definitely.
Completely. It's like the sailboat. I mean, it's interesting that you're measuring. Annabelle was doing that last week, and she was like really intensely self-monitoring as she was hearing more standoff, and you're not circling so much as you're describing the process of you seeing yourself in essentially a role, and you're kind of like disconnecting or measuring how it is for you.
Yeah, and that's the same way that like you may not be like, you may be a leader with a lot of power that isn't like dominating. Same way that people were like maybe humble without submitting, or being present via Circle Anywhere without physically being here. Like you may actually be like doing something that looks very much like the follower, and you are being a follower as an expression of your role, seen from this vantage point.
I try to gain some clarity.
Hope so.
So I imagine it feels simple to me to say happy, right? Concrete, someone laughing. Linguistic, it's a positive feeling. Meta-aware is if you asked me 100 times, how do I know I'm happy? But I can say, well, it's shimmering in my stomach. How do you make it happy? Until I finally was just like, the feeling itself is unmanageable. Imagine that's meta-awareness.
Yeah, I think these are really rough categories. So I think what you said was really cool. I like that. I would say a different thing for meta-aware happiness, but I don't know that you're wrong. Does that make sense?
Well, because for me, and this is where I'm trying to gain clarity, is for me, a step past linguistic would be non-linguistic, and so it would be just the feeling of feeling the thing, which is not, can't put a finger on it, can't describe.
Yeah. I would say, there's people that type questions. We'll come back to them. Say like with happiness, I'd say like, yeah, the smile, then you have like the feeling of being happy, and then here there's a sense, what I would say is like sense of acceptance or like joy at experiencing like you're like, holy shit, like experience is not to be taken for granted. So no matter what is happening to me, even if it's like extreme pain, like there's something where I'm like in alignment or like my soul is ordered.
Where I'm confused is that while like a huge, deep idea, it still feels like a linguistic idea.
Yeah. Yeah, the earlier word I had for this was subtle, but that runs into like another like model that gets confusing. But I'm not sure this is the right word for this reason exactly. I think you can always point to like it's kind of like what you were saying earlier. Was it Mark? You were saying that like, well, maybe it was you were saying like, all objects are kind of like somewhat divorced from the pointers that we put on it.
Right.
So
And all ideas.
that's true at the whole scale.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine what you're talking about, like with linguistic, like with the example of happy is like, Ben says happy, then I'm like, well, the definition of happy is this, so that must mean what you mean. Then you're actually like, I'm just so like done with my sadness that I'm happy, even though I'm still sad. And it's like, that's like a meta-aware like thing that you're like still languaging, but like it's different than what my dictionary tells me. That
Just seems like meta-aware then is just the like moving past the accepted linguistic to like a deeper linguistic.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Playing older named Cray. In the URL when you use frame vehicle doesn't always equal the content.
You guys are coming, so it must be that we're almost time to do the next activity. Oh, yes. So let's stop there. I'm going to check what these people say. I thought it was more towards language, concrete leader quality, speaking first, and/or drawing attention. Yeah, that's a good example of concrete leader quality. Did you get the clarity you wanted?
Yeah.
I think the one thing I want to caution, and maybe that I'm like, this is where the model is just not that refined yet. I think we make a mistake as people who are like, oh, we can't talk about it in language. Like people often talk about like mystical experience that way. But I actually think that that's true of any experience. Like you can't talk about it until you've had an experience and you can get enough of a consensus around what we're pointing to put a word to it.
Hmm.
And the biggest example of this I can think of is like the ocean. If you had never been to the ocean, which is a very concrete thing, you could put a fence around it. It'd be hard to, but you get the idea. Imagine trying to explain that to somebody who had never seen the ocean. You're like, it's like a lake, but it's salty and it's a billion times bigger, and like the waves are constant and they're controlled by the moon, and there's like really weird creatures that live 7 miles beneath the ocean floor. And you're like, well, it just doesn't. It would sound like utter nonsense. It'd be like, can I get whatever you're smoking? Because that sounds cool.
That makes me think of. Did you ever read the Silver Chair, the 690 book?
Yeah.
When they're like trying to be like, no, the sun exists. Like we know, we've been there. And she's like, no, you just saw that lamp, and you're like making up a better one.
Right.
It's like that.
Yeah. So it's like that kind of thing. It's the same with like, yeah. If you talk about like God, there is something like it's a trickier word because it encompasses so much, but a lot of like mystical experiences, like people can like, they use very different language, and when they get together and start talking about it, they're like, oh yeah, like that, we're talking about the same thing, so let's agree to call it one thing, similar. And like people did this like in certain like, meditation traditions, like, okay, cool, we'll call this, the whatever type of awakening or something. And similarly, like to the ocean, like I'd say circling is like an activity which like we can put in this, it's like language bound. It like points us to these kinds of experiences, and it makes zero sense to somebody that has not experienced it the same way the ocean makes zero sense to somebody who's not. So yeah, that's my only worry about using this terminology is that it's making it seem like the experiences that are like we're pointing to that are more experiential, like that you should not try to language them, and I think that's a mistake. I think there's a lot of like clarity and like helpful pointers to like different aspects of a meta-aware experience that you can get by like starting to converse about these experiences and try to language them.
Just add one thought to that, which is that the process of languaging, I think it's inevitable for human beings, but I think it's also, like we talked about like at the beginning, it adds its own structure to things. And I think that's what I feel like I have to be vigilant about, because I really want to be in touch with what's feeding this instinct that we have to represent everything.
Yeah, and ideally you have it so that it's like you're not like the same way you're not getting rid of a physical body when you have a personality. You're including it in a larger kind of self-concept. Ideally, you're not getting rid of language. Like you're just including that within a much larger experience of the world. So like the linguistic experience is here, the concrete experience is here, and it's kind of a transcendent, inclusive situation. So
I missed the beginning, but are you saying, what I'm picking up from about what you're saying is that labels are only useful for those who share the labels, but you can use descriptives to communicate things when the labels don't.
I think that's a different thing. We're in the kind of tail end, so let me just wrap this part up and we'll start the next segment in 10 minutes. I like what you're saying, but I think I'm going to have to set you aside for the moment and check with the group that was here to get the whole thing before we wrap up. Any questions or comments from those who are here before we move to the next segment?
Really good.
Thank you. Good. Were you here 2 weeks ago when we talked about resonating and experiencing?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
It just came to mind, which is that while you were talking about 5 minutes ago, I started feeling really disconnected because we were talking, and it became like it was like waves of abstraction, abstraction, and I felt like how easy it is to get that sense of isolation. That my experience is so hard to yield forth in a way that.
That's super helpful. Then to close it down, I'll say like just like I said with the surrender side, if there's like one thing you can take away, or the present side where you're noticing in a conversation like, oh, my mind's wandering, maybe that's relevant. But the one takeaway I'd say from this thing, which we were just exploring together, like I hadn't tried to define these yet, would be like you may have like some really small act of like leadership. It doesn't look like leadership. That when you can see yourself that way, you might be surprised at like the enthusiasm you get to like make a little change that could have a big difference. And one example of that would be like in a conversation, if you notice yourself like you just did, wanting something more experiential, wanting to feel more connected, like taking a moment to share like what's happening for you and share your longing without making what's happening wrong in any way. I think that'd be a really powerful act of leadership from this point of view. Yeah, I like finding some kind of bow. Thank you guys. Take a 10-minute break and we'll start.
Very nice.
Thank you guys.
Beautiful.
Thank you.